back here, obviously a Navy airplane. We don't have a tail hook in this on this airplane, but you can see it would have been behind the tail wheel. A lot of different airplanes had different designs. Some of them had the tail wheel in front of the hook in front of the tail wheel, as an example, the Zero. The SNJ, which would have been the training airplane that the naval aviator would have gotten his wings in, had the tail hook in front of the tail wheel. So it just depends on the design of the engineer, but this one would have been, you can see the spot back there where it would have been. Let me start with the CAG there. Tom talked actually fairly in depth about the commander and then Commander McCampbell. He's the one who we have painted this aircraft after. At the time that he was racking up his last kills and becoming the ace of the aces in the Navy, he was the commander of Air Group 15. So that's what the CAG is, and he would have had that special stripe on his airplane to designate this airplane as the commander of the Air Group. We had a question about the different dash numbers of the airplane. There were really only two that were produced, production, the Dash 3 and the Dash 5. We consider this a Dash 5. As Ron kind of talked about when we talked about the history, it's really a Franklin Hellcat. It's pieces and parts of a lot of different ones. The main difference between the Dash 3 and the Dash 5 was the engine. Though they put the same R2800 on it, it's a Dash 10W. They added water injection to it. And that just gave it an extra 100 to 200 horsepower. Almost like a combat mode. When I need it, I'm going all the way up and I get an extra 100 plus horsepower with that water injection.
Is that only, can you only use that for a short time?
Yes, and in fact, even full power, RPM all the way up to 2,700 turns, and manifold all the way up to 52 inches, you can only have about 15 minutes at that power setting. The other main difference, the weak area, if this airplane had a weak area, it was in the horizontal tail. So when they were out in the test, these are still the prototypes and the test versions, when they're seeing how much can this thing really pull. But remember back in 41, they're designing this with slide rules, not with computers. So when they're out testing it, and how many G's can this thing come back hold, they would come back with this thing almost like a go-away. So these things are bending up under stress. They're getting up over 6.5, 7 G. So this was the weak area of the airplane. And that's the other main difference they did to the Dash 5, other than the water-injected engine, was they beat up the horizontal tail, the whole rear part of the fuselage. Okay, moving around. You can see the kills up there. Navy guys usually get in the airplane on the wrong side. You can watch Chris do that here in about 15 minutes. Up he goes on this. Interesting, you'll see when we finish spreading the wing. Really genius. This is all manual. We're going to show you. We're going to fold this thing to help tow it out so we don't hit the helicopter. And then when we get out there, we're going to spread these things. All manual labor. Granted, they have plenty of that on the carrier at the time. Ingenious folding mechanism that started on the F4F, the Wildcat. Same thing on this thing, and it even progressed further into the TBM Avenger, except now they added hydraulics to it. But it's the same kind of fold back, and it pivots on this off-camber angle, which you'll get to see here in a little bit. But manually, it's all manual there. Got pins under here that will help keep the wing back this way. So you have to have someone up under there. You have to have someone up in the cockpit because it's hand pumped, kick in, hydraulically actuated pins. It comes back and forth, it goes through the different parts of the wing to keep it steady. And then the little pump pad goes up and down again, manually moved, lever, bank, belt cranks, other push rod tube, all the way out to the wing. The lower drops another pin into this big locking pin that moves back and forth. You get another manual pin that goes into it this way just to double check to keep that thing keep let's keep walking around here. Downside to flying this airplane at speed, and there were very few. If you can see better from this area, the aileron, when he's fully deflected, hooks down below the bottom of the wing. Right? So no problems going up this way. The aileron coming down like this would have raised this wing, and now this would have lowered the wing there. And when you're at speed, that's a real drag inducer right here. When you're at speed and you're at, we'll call that 250 miles an hour or greater, and you go full deflection to the left here like this, that's going to catch a lot of airstream, and it's reported, and we don't fly these airplanes very fast, that it could rip the stick right out of your hand with this snap roll, with the wind catching this thing right here.
Same thing happen when the aileron goes down?
No,
It sticks
it
up
does on the
above-
other side.
But when it's down, it sticks up quite a bit above the wing.
Yeah, they did not have, because when it goes down like this, though you're increasing the lift here, they were not seeing that same issue.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, so interesting there, and I find it very interesting because where this airplane dominated this airplane was in speed, especially going downhill. Right, that thing hit about 230, 250 miles an hour and just kind of stopped. Where this thing would go up to the high 400 miles an hour, and that's where we learned it with the Wildcat and then exploited it with this airplane and the Corsairs and our other airplanes, because we could outrun it going downhill. And now you can get away, you can get out of ordnance, gun range, and either work your way back around into the fight or go home and be alive to fight another day. So let's come around this way to the ordnance. 3 50 caliber machine guns on each side, so that's 6. Each gun held 400 rounds, so that's 2,400 rounds when it's fully loaded. That's a lot, especially that the guy, when he was fully loaded, had about 1,200 rounds. And the vast majority of those were 30 caliber, 7.7 millimeter, about a 30 caliber. And when shooting this with a 30 caliber with all the armor, 200 pounds of armor around the cockpit to protect the pilot, and then more armor around the oil cooler, about in this area, and the oil tank, which sits 4 feet in front of the cockpit there. A lot of armor around that to protect the oil, the pilot, and then the oil system.
Okay, so when you're firing the guns, they fire, is there a trigger for the left side, the right side, or does everything fire?
Everything's firing.
Everything's firing?
Everything's firing.
And so 2,400 rounds, how many, is that 30 seconds, 90 seconds?
I'd have to do some math in public.
No more questions, right?
I'd rather not. That brings up a good question, and I should know this, and I don't. Is the rounds per minute that these guns are fired. Okay? They are hydraulically fired, so that's one thing. The hydraulic system pushes these guns, so fires in a way. It's not a Gatling gun, but it's a machine gun in there. So I'm estimating that this thing's going to be shooting around 600 rounds per minute. So that should give you a lot of time. 2,400 rounds is a lot.
Okay.
Rob,
Is a lot.
can you talk about why the barrels are staggered like that?
Good question, okay? The barrels are staggered like this because the whole guns are staggered, so that they can take the lead gun and you flop that belt of ammunition out this way. Now where you put the next one is back just a little bit, and then back just a little bit for the outboard gun. So you can stretch those belts of ammunition this way and deconflict those laterally this way, so you don't have to make the wing thicker.
So loading the weapon, you load it, there's a panel on the top of the wing, that's where you put the ammo in.
Yeah, you bet. Ask me that question when we get around to the folded wing, because we can see the top of the wing there. Okay. Another part of the Dash 5, the later model of the airplane, They switched the inboards to 20 millimeter. So they flew 2 50 cal and 1 20 millimeter later in the war. By that time, really the only airplanes that were in the fleet flying in that configuration were doing the night fighter thing. So later they put radars on the wings, you know, elementary, early radars, especially early. That's good. That's advancing technology because we had big radars. The British were using those in the Battle of Britain. But to reduce it to the size that you could mount it on the wing of an airplane, that was a real leap in technology.
Did the pilot have the option of what weapons to use, like 20 millimeter?
He would have with the 20 millimeters, not when he had 6 50 cals. You're just squeezing and hopefully the hydraulics are working and everything's getting armed properly and all 6 guns are firing at the same time. But as you can kind of tell, as this thing really got into the fleet, the things were working. So as long as the pilot caught them, the guns worked.
I assume the bullets converge as opposed to right now.
Yeah, you know, all the guns, yeah. All the airplanes had guns and they had a harmonization range. And they could adjust those a little bit by skewing the barrels. The armament folks, the ammo folks would do that as needed to develop a harmonization range. How far in front of this airplane do I want all 6 bullets hitting each other? And they would pick that range based on how the tactics they were using, the enemy they were fighting. They didn't have to change it a lot. It's not like they changed it day to day to day. But they would have picked a harmonization range. I'll throw out 200 yards. That's not very far when you're doing 250, 300 miles an hour behind an airplane that's trying to get out of the way of your bullet. That's not very far out in front of you. Okay, good question, very good question. I'll throw this out from the pilot perspective. You take a quick look. The gear, when you retract it, it's got gearing up here. So as it starts to move backwards based on hydraulic pressure, it's gonna rotate this way, and then back it goes.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's in terms of aviation with this type of size airplane, that's a barn door right there. So when you get checked out in the Hellcat, that's the first thing they're going to tell you. Okay, when you raise that landing gear, know that you're going to go a little bit like that, because as soon as that door, you got 2 of them, rotates this way, that's drag that's now in the airstream as you're starting to accelerate. And you feel that, absolutely. You in the cockpit feel a little bit of this deceleration. And it's minute, it takes, you know, a fraction of a second. The first time you experience it, you say, wow, that was 5 minutes long, and it's really like, you know, a fraction of a second. Because then, as soon as it does that, and now it starts getting out of the main wind stream, you know, you're accelerating right through. Tom talked about the prototypes, or the first airplanes had the R2600 engine on it, and that wasn't going much faster than the Wildcat, so they threw the 2800 on it, 2,000 horsepower. You'll hear it, boy, it sounds great. It just drowns out every other airplane around. It throws this big prop really, really well. Surprising, this airplane, of all the airplanes we have here, the fighters, this one has the least amount, in this 3-point attitude, the least amount of prop ground clearance. So when you come back to land, you better need to make sure you're getting that nose up to get as close, if not to a 3-point attitude as you can to avoid a crossfire.
Rob, even less than the Bearcat?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. All right, so we talked about the fuel injection. So the Dash 3 to the Dash 5, basically the same engine. They just added some ducting and some hoses, and they put water injection in it. Get a few extra horsepower for those, you know, what did Tom talk about? 6 minutes? 6 minutes he was in a fight and shot down 7 or 9 airplanes. So it's kind of an hour to get out there. It's 6 minutes of sheer kill or survive. and then an hour back. All right, so coming back around, let's come over here and talk about this ingenious mechanism over here. Okay, we can't get everyone under the wing, but if you can look, you can see as this wing comes down, there's a little pin hole right up there. That when the wing spreads out this way, again, it's all manual. This ingenious thing here, that's going to align with the pin that's under here, and then the pilot in the cockpit is going to manually hand pump this thing. He's going to pump that pin back through the hole right there. And that's going to secure the wing. We add that last bit of protection with this large pin that comes backwards. The pilot puts the little top hats down. Now another pin goes through, and that's all. It's just ingenious. It's in the cockpit, and there's no hydraulics, no electronics. It's just connections and fancy footwork and belt cranks and push rods. It's a challenge. You need a fair number of people to fold the wings, because you can't control when you start pumping this pin out. You can't control which pin's going to come out first. So you need to have people on both wing tips. As soon as that pin comes out, based on the angle of the dangle, these wings may come backwards. And once they get going, just inertia, there's lots of metal up in there, then they're going to swing back and you could damage some of the hinging. It's much easier to spread them because of this little thing right here. If this is part of the hydraulic line, and if that's not depressed by this part of the wing, then you are not putting hydraulic pressure to that pin. So you can spread one wing at a time. Now, does this matter to the guys on the carriers 70 years ago? No, because manpower they did have. But it's interesting when you take it to an air show these days, you may not have half a dozen people to help you. Granted, at an air show, you're not doing a lot of folding and spreading wings.
Any idea how much that wing panel weighs?
No. Somebody might know. Mike? Where's Mike? Mike B? Mike, you know how much this wing panel weighs?
How much is that?
I don't know, but it's heavy.
Is that metric?
Sorry? 8,000 pounds.
Did the Japanese have anything like this?
It's heavy.
On their planes?
No. I don't know a great deal about the Japanese planes other than the Zero. I know a fair amount about the Zero. And the Zero is a great example of, to get the performance that the Japanese Navy wanted, think about the size of the Pacific. They needed range, and range, and range, and range. And then once you got there, you needed to fight and be able to kill and survive, absolutely. So the way they would do that was lightness. So they kept their airplanes light. What did they not put in those airplanes that this airplane had 300-400 pounds of? Armor. Earlier question, you can see the panels here that are on the top of the wing that align neatly with where these machine guns are going to be, so that you could layer by layer, I mean going from fore to aft, the belts of machine gun bullets, so that you could offset them, and that's why these guys are staggered.
How many rounds would they take on each mission?
They would have been, I would assume, they'd have been full up. So that's 400 rounds per gun, 400 times 6. So 2,400 is a fair number of bullets when you're shooting 600 rounds a minute. So they the most probably ran out of fuel before they ran out of bullets. Although this Battle of the Philippine Sea, 3 different waves of Japanese airplanes. We talked about the range. That's an advantage the Japanese had in this battle, was their aircraft, all of them, and their strike packages, fighters, their dive bombers, their torpedo planes, all had greater range than the Navy versions. So they could be further away, up and here, and attack us, and we could not attack back. We could defend. That's what this airplane did. right? We sunk 3 Japanese carriers in that battle, 2 of them by submarines. The third one was our airplanes. Now we got close enough as the battle progressed, but the Japanese could launch from further away. But when they sent these 3 waves, totaling what did Tom say, 380 airplanes, these guys in force, a wave of blue, were ready and able to meet them. And had a turkey